In the dusty attic of a century-old house in Valladolid, Spain, a worn wooden box awaited to reveal its mysteries. It was the year 2024, and Carmen Rodriguez had just inherited the family property after the death of her great-aunt. Among the belongings accumulated over decades, she would find a photograph that would forever change the understanding of her family history. The image in question, dated from 1911. According to the elegant handwritten calligraphy on its reverse, it was a formal portrait showing 5 people. A patriarch with a thick mustache and stern expression occupied the center of the composition. Beside him, a young woman held a baby in her arms, while 2 small girls completed the family group. All were dressed in their finest clothes, reflecting the photographic protocol of the Spanish Edwardian era. For more than a century, this photograph had remained filed along with other family memories, apparently with no greater relevance than documenting a moment in time. The family descendants had contemplated it on occasions, identifying those portrayed according to oral tradition passed down from generation to generation: grandfather Tomás, his wife Mercedes, and their 3 children. However, something in the image awakened Carmen's curiosity. The woman identified as Mercedes seemed extraordinarily young to be the mother of 3 children. Her body posture and the expression in her eyes suggested a subtle discomfort, a tension that contrasted with the maternal authority expected in a family photograph from 1911. This initial observation motivated Carmen to seek answers beyond traditional family stories. She decided to consult a specialist in historical photography, Dr. Miguel Herrera, a recognized expert who regularly collaborated with the Museum of Valladolid. His experience in analyzing images from the early 20th century could shed light on the peculiarities she had detected in the portrait. What Carmen didn't imagine was that this consultation would trigger an investigation that would reveal one of the deepest family dramas of rural Spain in the 20th century, a secret kept in silence for more than 100 years. Miguel Herrera's office, located in a historic building in downtown Valladolid, had become a photographic research laboratory surrounded by specialized magnifying glasses, digital measuring equipment, and an extensive library on the history of Spanish photography. The expert began his meticulous analysis of the 1911 family portrait. The first technical observation focused on the image quality. The photograph had been taken in a professional studio, evidenced by the controlled lighting and elaborately decorated background with typical elements of the Catalan modernist style that had spread throughout Spain. The photographer had used a silver gelatin technique, common in urban studios of the era, which suggested that the family had traveled from their native village to a larger city for the occasion. However, it was the anthropometric analysis that revealed the first significant anomalies. Using facial measurement techniques developed for authenticating historical photographs, Dr. Herrera detected inconsistencies in the proportions and physiognomic characteristics of those portrayed. The woman identified as Mercedes, the mother, showed facial features that placed her in an age range considerably younger than expected for a mother of 3 children in 1911. The analysis of facial bone structure, skin texture visible in the high-resolution photograph, and particularly the shape and expression of the eyes, indicated that the woman was approximately between 16 and 18 years old. This age was incompatible with the motherhood of 3 children, considering that the oldest girl appeared to be at least 8 years old. But the most revealing anomaly emerged when comparing facial features among the different group members, applying facial recognition software adapted for historical photographs. Dr. Herrera discovered surprising structural similarities between the supposed mother and the 2 older girls. The facial angles, nose shape, and particularly the eye configuration showed genetic patterns that suggested a fraternal rather than maternal relationship. This technical discovery opened a fundamental question. If Mercedes wasn't the mother, who was she really? And more importantly, what circumstances had led a teenager to assume the maternal role in an official family photograph from 1911? The investigation moved to the parish archives of San Martín de Valladolid, the small town of origin of the Rodriguez family. In these records, meticulously preserved since the 10th century, they would find the keys to unraveling the family mystery. The diocesan archivist, Sister Esperanza, had dedicated decades to organizing these historical documents that constituted the official memory of generations of Castilian families. The parish baptism books revealed crucial information. The patriarch of the photograph, Tomás Rodríguez Hernández, had married in 1889 to Francisca Jimenez Morales. The records showed the birth of 4 children: Isabel in 1890, Mercedes in 1893, Carmen in 1899, and finally Antonio in 1911, the same year as the photograph. This chronology generated more questions than answers. If Mercedes had been born in 1893, in 1911 she would be barely 18 years old, which confirmed Dr. Herrera's estimates about her apparent age in the photograph. However, the records also revealed a disturbing fact. Francisca Jimenez, the biological mother, had died in February 1911, barely 3 months after Antonio's birth. She was a victim of puerperal complications that claimed so many maternal lives in rural Spain of the early 20th century. Francisca's death from childbirth complications had left Tomás widowed with 4 children, including a newborn. In rural Spain of 1911, this situation represented a family crisis of enormous proportions. The rigid social structures of the era dictated that orphans should be cared for within the extended family nucleus and that the public image of family stability should be maintained at all costs. The parish records also revealed that the photograph had been taken in September 1911, 6 months after Francisca's death. This explained why Mercedes, the available eldest daughter at 18 years old, had assumed the mother's role in the official portrait in a society where paternal authority and traditional family structure were fundamental to social reputation. Presenting Mercedes as mother instead of older sister would have been a strategy to maintain the appearance of family normalcy. This documentary discovery confirmed the technical suspicions. Mercedes was not the mother, but the older sister who had sacrificed her youth to keep the family together after the maternal tragedy. The investigation expanded toward oral testimonies from living descendants of the Rodriguez family in the towns of Castilla y León. Family memory is transmitted through stories told in kitchens during long winter afternoons and at family gatherings. These narratives, although often fragmentary and transformed by time, contain elements of historical truth that complement official records. The first interview was conducted with Remedios Rodriguez, 89 years old, Mercedes' granddaughter and the last survivor of her generation. Remedios lived in a nursing home in Valladolid, but retained a remarkable memory for family details. Her memories about her grandmother Mercedes were imbued with deep admiration, mixed with an inexplicable sadness that now began to make sense. "My grandmother Mercedes never married," Remedios recalled with a trembling voice. "She said she had already raised enough children. We thought she was referring to her brothers, but now I understand she was referring to something deeper. She sacrificed her own life to keep the family united after my great-grandmother Francisca died." The testimonies revealed touching details about Mercedes's later life. She had remained single throughout her life, dedicating herself completely to caring for her younger brothers and later her nephews. Her renunciation of marriage and biological motherhood had been a conscious decision, motivated by a sense of family duty that Spanish society of the early 20th century imposed especially on older women in orphaned families. Another revealing testimony came from Aurelio Rodriguez, 76 years old, Tomás's great-grandson. Aurelio remembered stories told by his grandfather Antonio, the baby in the photograph, about how Mercedes had been more than a sister. She had been his second mother. "My grandfather Antonio always said that Mercedes had taught him to walk, to read, and had given him all the maternal love he had lost with his biological mother's death." These family testimonies confirmed that Mercedes' sacrifice had transcended the simple pose in a photograph. It had implied the complete renunciation of her own personal life to assume the maternal responsibilities that circumstances and society had imposed on her. To fully understand the implications of Mercedes's sacrifice, it was necessary to examine the social and cultural context of Spain in 1911. This historical period, known as the Bourbon Restoration, was characterized by rigid social structures, especially in rural areas of Castilla y León, where conservative traditions maintained strict control over family and social behavior. In rural Spain of the early 20th century, the family constituted the fundamental economic and social unit. The death of the family mother represented a crisis that threatened not only the survival of younger children, but also the reputation and economic stability of the entire family unit. The options available to a family in this situation were limited and all implied significant sacrifices. The first option would have been for Tomás to remarry quickly. However, Finding a woman willing to assume responsibility for 4 children, including a newborn, at a time when infant mortality was high and economic resources limited, would have been extremely difficult. Additionally, a new marriage so soon after Francisca's death would have been seen as a lack of respect toward the deceased's memory. The second option would have been to disperse the younger children among extended family or religious institutions. This practice was common, but would have meant the complete disintegration of the family unit, and would have marked the children with the social stigma of being dispersed orphans, a condition that would significantly limit their future opportunities for marriage and social advancement. The third option, the one the Rodriguez family finally chose, was for Mercedes to prematurely assume the maternal role. This decision allowed them to keep the family unit intact and preserve social reputation, but required the complete sacrifice of an 18-year-old teenager's personal aspirations. In this context, the 1911 photograph acquires a deeper dimension. It was not simply a family portrait, but a public declaration of stability and normalcy. By presenting Mercedes as mother instead of older sister, the family communicated to the community that they had overcome the crisis and maintained their traditional structure intact. The detailed analysis of Mercedes Rodriguez's later life reveals the magnitude of the sacrifice she had assumed at 18 years old. Municipal records and family testimonies construct the portrait of a woman whose existence was completely defined by her dedication to the family, renouncing all personal aspirations typical of a young woman of her era. Mercedes never married, a decision that in rural Spain of the early 20th century had profound social implications. In a society where marriage constituted the only path to personal and economic fulfillment for women, remaining single was considered an anomaly that generated speculation and often social pity. However, family testimonies suggest that this decision was completely conscious and motivated by her commitment to raising her younger brothers. Parish records show that Mercedes rejected at least 3 documented marriage proposals between 1912 and 1920. One of them came from Evaristo Hernandez, son of a prosperous merchant family from Medina del Campo, which would have represented an exceptional opportunity for social advancement. Her rejection of this proposal confirms that her decision to remain single was not the product of lack of opportunities, but a deliberate choice to prioritize her role as substitute mother. Mercedes' daily life was structured completely around her brother's needs. She rose before dawn to prepare breakfast and organize the children's clothes for school. During the day, she managed domestic economy, supervised minor agricultural tasks, and in the afternoons taught her younger brothers to read and write, particularly Antonio, who had lost his biological mother as barely a baby. Her sacrifice also implied renunciation of her own biological motherhood. At a time when having children was considered the natural destiny and fundamental purpose of every woman, Mercedes channeled all her maternal instinct toward her brothers. Family testimonies describe how Antonio, the baby in the photograph, called her Mama Mercedes well into his adolescence, and how she responded to this title with a mixture of pride and melancholy. Mercedes's personal correspondence, partially preserved in family archives, reveals moments of deep loneliness and reflections on the path not taken. In a letter addressed to a cousin who lived in Madrid, she wrote, "Sometimes I wonder what my life would have been like if circumstances had been different, but when I see Antonio smile, or when Carmen hugs me, I know I made the right decision." Mercedes' sacrifice had profound repercussions that extended through subsequent generations of the Rodriguez family, creating behavioral patterns and family values that would endure for decades. Her decision to assume the maternal role not only saved the immediate family unit, but established a precedent of personal sacrifice for collective well-being that would influence her descendants' decisions. Antonio Rodriguez, the baby in the photograph who had grown up under Mercedes' maternal care, developed a complex relationship with the feminine figure and the concept of motherhood. Family records show that he married late at 35 years old to Maria Fernandez, a woman 7 years older than him, in what current family psychologists would interpret as an unconscious search for the maternal figure he had lost prematurely. His marriage was characterized by extraordinary devotion to his wife and an almost obsessive protection of his own children. Antonio ensured that his children never experienced the maternal loss he had suffered, developing a hyperprotective parental style that compensated for the unprocessed trauma of his early childhood. Isabel Rodriguez, Mercedes' older sister, developed a different behavioral pattern, but equally influenced by the family experience. She married young at 19 years old, apparently motivated by the desire to establish her own family and avoid the fate of personal sacrifice she had observed in Mercedes. However, she maintained throughout her life a feeling of guilt for having escaped the family responsibilities that Mercedes had completely assumed. Carmen Rodriguez, the middle sister, adopted a mediation position between these two extreme reactions. She married at a conventional age, but maintained a deep commitment to caring for Mercedes during her old age, considering that she had a moral debt to the one who had sacrificed her youth for family well-being. Mercedes' grandchildren inherited fragmentary stories about their grandmother who never married, but the true magnitude of her sacrifice had been softened by family narratives. They had been transmitted the image of a strong and independent woman, but not necessarily that of a teenager who had renounced her own life to keep the family united. This partial romanticization of Mercedes' sacrifice created in subsequent generations an admiration for feminine self-sacrifice that paradoxically also generated pressure on family women to prioritize family needs over personal aspirations. In 2024, when Carmen Rodriguez shared the investigation's findings with surviving family members, the revelation generated complex reactions that reflected how family secrets, even those maintained for noble reasons, can alter generations' understanding of their own history and identity. The first family meeting to discuss the discoveries was held at Remedios House, Mercedes' 89-year-old granddaughter. 12 family members attended, representing 4 generations of descendants. The presentation of technical, documentary, and testimonial evidence created an initial silence, followed by a series of intense emotional reactions. Some members experienced a sense of validation. They had intuitively perceived that something in traditional family stories didn't fit completely, and the revelation finally explained those subtle inconsistencies they had noticed in photographs, dates, and orally transmitted accounts. Other family members experienced a sense of loss. The image they had constructed about their ancestors, based on decades of family narratives, required complete restructuring. The independent grandmother, who never married, was transformed into the teenager who sacrificed her life for the family. A more complex, and in a certain sense more tragic narrative. The most intense reaction came from the young women in the family. Maria Carmen Rodriguez, Mercedes' great-granddaughter, 28 years old, expressed a mixture of admiration and indignation. "It's incredible what our ancestor did, but it's also terrible that a society forced an 18-year-old girl to renounce her entire personal life. It makes me reflect on the pressures that we as women continue to face to sacrifice ourselves for the family." The men in the family experienced reactions of retrospective guilt. Although they rationally understood they had no responsibility for decisions made decades before their birth. They felt an emotional burden for the sacrifice Mercedes had made to maintain the family lineage of which they were direct beneficiaries. The revelation also generated questions about other possible family secrets. If the 1911 photograph had hidden such a significant truth for more than a century, what other family stories might require re-examination? This uncertainty created both anxiety and curiosity among descendants. The recontextualization of Mercedes Rodriguez's story transformed not only the family understanding of her legacy, but also the valuation of her contribution to the survival and cohesion of the family lineage. Her sacrifice, now completely documented and understood, acquired heroic dimensions that transcended previous romantic narratives. The complete genealogical analysis revealed that Mercedes' decision had had a decisive impact on the Rodriguez family's survival. Without her intervention, the dispersion of younger brothers would have been inevitable, and the family line would have fragmented irrecoverably. Antonio, the baby she raised as her own son, became the patriarch who kept the family united during the Spanish Civil War and post-war periods, when family cohesion was fundamental for economic and social survival. The descendants decided to publicly honor Mercedes' memory. A ceremony was organized at the cemetery of San Martín de Valení, where she is buried, to place a new tombstone that would recognize her true role in family history. The inscription, agreed upon by family consensus, read, Mercedes Rodriguez Jimenez, 1893-1967, sister, mother, guardian of the family. The 1911 photograph acquired new meaning as a family symbol. It was no longer simply a period portrait, but a visual testimony of the moment when a teenager assumed a responsibility that would define the rest of her life. The family decided to professionally restore the image and create copies for each descendant family nucleus. An annual family tradition was also established. Every September 15th, the date the original photograph was taken, descendants gather to remember Mercedes' story and reflect on the meaning of personal sacrifice for family well-being. This commemoration became an opportunity for young generations to understand both the admiration and criticisms toward traditional gender roles that Mercedes' story exemplifies. Mercedes' rediscovered legacy also inspired changes in contemporary family dynamics. Young women in the family expressed their determination to honor her memory not by replicating her sacrifice, but by ensuring that no future generation of women would have to choose between personal fulfillment and family well-being. Mercedes' story became a reminder that behind many apparently ordinary family photographs, there may exist narratives of sacrifice, love, and survival that deserve to be remembered and understood in all their complexity. The investigation of the 1911 family photograph was completed with a transformed understanding of its historical and emotional significance. What had begun as a routine consultation about an apparently conventional image had become the rediscovery of a family sacrifice story that resonated through more than a century. Dr. Miguel Herrera documented the case as a paradigmatic example of how modern photographic analysis techniques can reveal hidden historical narratives. His technical report, which included anthropometric analysis, documentary research, and family testimonies, was published in the Spanish Journal of Photography History as a case study on the importance of re-examining family archives with contemporary scientific tools. For the Rodriguez family, the experience had been transformative on multiple levels. Carmen, who had initiated the investigation, expressed a sense of deeper connection with her ancestors. "Now, when I look at this photograph, I don't just see 5 people posing formally. I see a story of family love, of sacrifice, and of the extraordinary strength of a very young woman who made decisions that would change the course of future generations." The original photograph was framed with a new mounting that included an explanatory plaque with Mercedes' complete story. It was placed in a place of honor in the family home, where it serves as a constant reminder of the untold stories that may exist behind the most familiar images. The case also generated interest in the local academic community. The Museum of Valladolid organized an exhibition titled Hidden Stories in Family Photographs, where the Rodriguez image was presented alongside other similar cases discovered in family archives of Castilla y León. The exhibition attracted visitors who brought their own family photographs for analysis, generating new discoveries about the region's social history. Mercedes Rodriguez, the teenager who had posed as a mother in 1911, finally received the recognition her sacrifice deserved. Her story became a testimony of how individual decisions made in moments of crisis can influence the destiny of entire generations. The 1911 photograph, which for more than a century had seemed simply normal, had revealed itself as the visual document of one of the deepest acts of family love in the history of a Castilian family. In their serious faces and formal composition, one could now read the complete story, that of a sister who became a mother, a teenager who became a savior, and a moment in time that defined the future of a complete family lineage.